Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. My name is Brandon, and welcome to this Free State Colorado interview. The mission of Free State Colorado is to promote a culture of liberty, freedom of the individual, and a free market. Today, I'm joined by Dave Williams. Dave has been a leader for liberty in the state legislature, where he served for 6 years in the state house. While representing House District 15, he received an A rating from Liberty Scorecard Colorado in 2022 and 2021, as well as a 91% rating in 2022 from the Colorado Union of Taxpayers. Dave was known as a no compromise advocate for life and liberty during his tenure in the state capitol. So, Dave, I hope you are well, and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. I'm glad to be here.
Well, great. You have a lot of experience and insider knowledge of Colorado politics, so I'm really hoping you can provide some insight into how the system works and how liberty-minded individuals can more effectively fight against this democratic authoritarianism we're seeing in Colorado right now.
Yeah,
So
for
after
sure.
so after serving in the state legislature for 6 years, what is the biggest misconception that people have about how the legislator operates?
Um, that the biggest misconception is that people think that that the agenda isn't pre-scripted, that people can go down there and actually educate their legislators and have them engage in this practice of self-governance in an honest and transparent way. The truth is, Democrat or Republican, but certainly the Democrats, when they take power, they already have their agenda mapped out long before the speaker is elected and the gavel is struck. They know exactly what they're going to do. And if you look at some of the recent examples, like the gun ban that you're going to see from Representative Epps, they've been working on that for at least 2-3 months, if not longer. Right? They were going to do something had they taken power, and I think ultimately, with the unfortunate shooting at Club Q, that only emboldened them to pursue the gun control agenda anyway. And the reason I know that is because for the past 6 years, they have been pursuing very methodically and incrementally gun control agenda. They've been just doing it in a way where they're chipping away at our freedom, sort of a death by 1,000 cuts. Now with the violence and the shooting at Club Q, they're just even more encouraged and motivated to pursue even more control, to the point where they're just going to do a so-called assault weapons ban, whatever that means. But I guess that's one thing I would tell you. Big misconception is you can just walk into a committee, testify, and change a mind. The truth is, no. A lot of these agenda items, a lot of these public policy fights have already been predetermined. I remember one time, it was my first year in the legislature, and we were having a debate on the floor. It was during second reading, and no one was in the chamber, right? Everyone was kind of out of the chamber, but there was a debate going on with the bill sponsors and those of us who were actually interested. And I remember the chair was kind of just going through the motions, and I went up there to kind of just learn more about what was going on and interact with the chair. And I noticed there was a binder. There was a binder with a script, a literal script on what the chair needs to say when we actually get down to the vote. And again, no one was really in the chamber. There was only maybe a handful of us out of 65. But when it came time to actually take a voice vote, the chair said, all in favor, say aye. All opposed, say nay, right? And there were certainly more no's than there were yays, because no one was in the building. But guess what the script said? The script said, bill passes, right? And what you'll quickly find out if you're ever elected is that there are scripts for everything. There's a script on second reading. There's a script on third reading. There's a script for the committee chair. There's a script for individuals that are dealing with stakeholders, lobbyists. I mean, there's this whole production in the background that's not really ever talked about. Um, the best way you could maybe look at it is that it's a way to help train legislators on how to get through the legally required process. But I don't view it that way. I view it as a system of control. Those in power are going to pursue their policy agenda, and they're going to do it in the most efficient way possible, and they're going to do it with this thin veneer of a democratic process, and it's it's all a bunch of bullshit. There's no other way to put it. So I guess I would say is yes, it's necessary for us to go down and let the politician know that we're not happy with what they're trying to do. But at the same time, don't kid yourself. Those people already know how they're going to vote, and it's true for me too. I'll give you an example. You can bring to me all the pro-abortion bills you want, and you can educate me on why you think it's beneficial. You can try to tell me how it's going to bring about, all these wonderful things. I'm going to vote no every time. There's no amount of education, no amount of lobbying, no amount of persuasion that you're going to be able to exert that's going to change my mind about passing abortion policy. It just won't work. So, that's just the hard reality of the legislature. Those people, all 100 of them, have kind of already made up their mind on most issues. And that's why they ran. That's why they wanted to have power, because they wanted to pass what they've already decided is right.
Well, then what about lobbyists? Because a lot of people would say, don't the lobbyists control the politicians, and the lobbyists are the ones kind of precipitating a lot of these bills to be introduced and kind of deciding what's going to become law? What role do the lobbyists have then at the
Sure,
legislature?
sure. I'm gonna give everyone sort of a truth bomb here. Fact is, lobbyists are some of the more honest actors in the legislature. And it makes sense if you really stop to think about it, because they are hired by businesses or by special interests or by other groups to advocate for their policy position. It's very transactional, right? They're given a certain amount of dollars to go lobby on behalf of their members or clients' interests. And the reason that they exist is because there's this whole ecosystem now that intersects with business and culture and society. And with that intersection comes the ability to really gain more influence, more power, but also affect one's bottom line. So, for instance, the oil and gas companies, right? They hire lobbyists. Why? Because they want to make sure that they have a friendly regulatory environment. But when you have Democrats who are in charge who want to affect the regulatory environment, these companies have no choice but to hire these lobbyists to try and play defense and prevent Democrats from harming their interests and ultimately their bottom line. That's an example of why lobbyists exist. But there's also another reason they exist, because you have special interests who got the politician elected in the first place. So that they have those people. So, for instance, big pharma is a great example. Maybe they want you to help them make it easier to sell their products onto the market, or block out competition, right? So if you have a name brand medicine, you want those people in the public buying that particular medicine. You don't want the generics being offered, because the generics, while as effective, they cost less, and the other guy is the one that's offering it. So if you get your preferred politician elected, you then in turn have to follow through and hire a lobbyist to go remind them of why they need to continue supporting the agendas that are aligned. So there's a lot of folks who are hiring lobbyists to not only play defense but play offense. And usually on offense, they're seeking ways to block out competitors. They're seeking ways to hold on to their monopoly, to create barriers to entry for anyone else who's not established. They're looking for ways to actually have the government subsidize their business. That's a big one. Most of the problems that you'll see, if not all of them, come from this love of money, right? I mean, we're talking about, I don't quite remember. I think it was about 46 billion that Governor Polis proposed in the budget for this go around. Certainly well above what I came into it with, but I think it's about 40 billion or so. Don't quote me on that, but still, that's $40 billion in taxpayer money that's being taken out of your wallet from the private sector and then being redistributed through the government coffers. With that kind of money, yeah, you're going to see a lot of special interests and lobbyists get in front of those legislators and get them to spend the money how they want to spend it. So when we're talking about the great example here, there's a bill right now that is going to mandate more hours and more training for teenagers to acquire a driver's license. It's absurd, but you want to know who's pushing it? I believe it's AAA. AAA is pushing it because they have a driver's ed course that matches the requirements of the bill. So they're doing it because they know that through government force, they can create a market that they'll have a monopoly over. And they're going to be ready to go because they already have the program in place. And if they can force people to adhere to these requirements that their program is already offering, those people are going to go to their program and purchase their training. And then any other competitors, they're going to kind of be hosed because they weren't first to market and because they have to figure out a price point that would be competitive, but it probably won't be competitive because the requirements are going to have sort of that minimum standard, which the standard's absurd. Think about this, right? The implications are far-reaching. If you're poor or you're underemployed and you're struggling to make ends meet, you're not going to be able to afford to actually get a license. And if you can't drive, that's going to block you out from actually getting a job or a meaningful one, or it's going to make it very hard to get a job, right? So there's a lot of things that are done in government simply for the love of money and the love of power. And lobbyists, yeah, they work with the legislators who have primarily made up their mind on a lot of issues, but they also entice them to go do these things because ultimately the payoff for the politician is on the back end, right? If they're running for re-election, but if I ran that bill, right, I know that on the back end, 2 years later, I can go to AAA and say, hey, I helped you create $1 million business now. I'm gonna need some help getting reelected. And that's how it goes. That's how the vicious cycle of politics in the legislature goes. It happens in Denver. It happens in every other state capital, and especially in Washington, D.C. Special interests get the politician elected. The politician gets their policy, the preferred policy of the special interest passed, and then the special interest gets them reelected, and you see this go on and on and on and on again. That's sort of the role and the dynamic that you see. But there are good people in the legislature that don't actually participate in that corrupted process. People like myself, people like Patrick Neville, these individuals, we don't like that because ultimately it's bankrupting our country. It's making people less free. It has real life consequences, even with respect to life and death. If you can't afford to heat your home, if you can't afford to put food on the table, you could die, or your children could die. If you can't afford to get generic prescription drugs because Big Pharma wants you to buy their name brand products, yeah, you could die, right? The gun ban, let's talk about the gun ban for a second. If the single mom has to wait 10 days before they can purchase a firearm, but within those 10 days, some sort of creep wants to rape them or harm them or kill them, what do you do, right? Those are real world consequences that these politicians, they don't really think about. And with respect to the gun ban, yes, they actually believe in that stuff, but make no mistake, there's big money in that gun ban. From Moms Demand Action to all these other special interest groups, they fundraise lots of money off of liberals and leftists who want gun bans. And so they pass these bills and then they go market how effective they are, and they ask people to give them more and more and more money, whether they be small dollar donors or your billionaire types like Michael Bloomberg. There is a ton of money in issue advocacy, and if you can pass policy to further sort of the grift, yeah, they'll do it. So it's a lot of the problem is money, and it gets back to that old axiom: if you want to know why someone's doing something, follow the money.
Yeah, very true. Very true. I mean, we have definitely reached this level of absurdity, especially in Colorado, but the rest of the country as well, where the government and these politicians are trying to exert control over the most minuscule aspects of our lives. And, definitely a symptom of the government getting too big and special interests really capturing this whole political landscape. So, I mean, it's a pretty grim picture, right? And I think there's a lot of despair or a lot of frustration among people who do believe in liberty and the traditional American values of freedom and free enterprise that are scratching their heads. And, maybe they want to get involved in the legislature. Maybe they want to show up and speak out. And I still encourage them to do so, even though it is not necessarily going to be effective, but there's other reasons to do it. So, what are some reasons why people should go testify at the state capitol?
Well, because you want to confront the politician. If you don't confront the politician, then they're gonna. I mean, so for instance, this is a classic excuse from a politician. Well, I voted for this bill because no one told me they were against it, and I'm here to represent my constituents. And if my constituents didn't say anything, then they must be okay with it, right? That's such a stupid, flawed excuse that these guys use. So it's a good idea to take away that excuse, right? Make them earn their deception, right? If they're gonna be crooks, make it hard for them to be crooks, right? Don't make it easy on them. The other reason is to get people on record, right? You want to confront your politician and you want to get them on camera, right? I mean, whip out your phone and record the conversation and ask them why they're doing stupid stuff. Make them say something, because ultimately the great equalizer in all this, it's the people. And our election system and our process, for as imperfect as it is still probably the best system that has ever been created in on this planet. We have the ability to organize in mass and throw out these politicians. It's going to be hard. It's not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. But if people got organized and they spent money, their own money, on getting good people elected, you'd have less of this crap going on. And truth be told, the other side, the special interests, the people that have a lot of money, they're just taking advantage of the system we have in place now. They're not doing anything that we can't do. We might not be able to fund it to the degree that they can, but we can organize and we can fundraise, and we don't need to match them dollar for dollar. We just need to be able to get enough so that our message gets out to the voters, to let them know. Because I think most voters, they don't know. They don't know that their representative or their senator is screwing them over, right? All they know is that that guy or gal, they come down every 2 years and they talk about how great they're doing, and they don't hear any other counter narrative. And so what are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to not believe the only person talking to them? No, if we're going to win, we have to be able to provide another alternative and a reason why we need change, right? So for instance, when we have 11 Republicans in the House voting for a Democrat speaker, their very first day, their very first vote, their first official vote, they vote for the most radical Democrat speaker in history, who then goes on to promise more gun control, more access to abortion, and more spending and taxation. That's what they voted for, right? But they're not going to go back to their districts and say they did that. They're not going to go campaign on it. And when confronted on it, what's their excuse? Their best excuse is, oh, well, out of tradition, we have to sacrifice our principles. That's a lame excuse. I think most voters would say, no, I didn't elect you to do that. I didn't elect you to go to Denver, to go along and get along, to go vote for a Democrat when there was a Republican alternative. Most
Yeah.
people don't know. It's our job to tell them what's going on and then ask them for a specific action item. So if you're a Republican politician or even your Democrat politician, if they do something contrary to what they've campaigned on, tell the voters in an organized way, tell the voters, and then encourage those voters to vote them out of office. It's a two-step process. You need to educate folks, and you need to ask them to do something. There's got to be a call to action with it. If there's no call to action, then it's just a waste of time.
Oh, definitely. Couldn't agree with you more. I think that's one of the biggest problems we've been facing is that people don't know. They don't know what they don't know. We have this establishment media that's going to play it safe and just, they're fed the narrative from these political power brokers or these political people and pushing it out there on society. And most Coloradans have no idea how their legislator is actually voting, which is why I think, I brought up your cut scores, the Colorado Union of Taxpayers and Colorado Liberty Scorecard, because it is nice that we do have some organizations who are doing that already.
Right.
But I think you're right entirely that we need to have a more organized effort to really expose what the politicians are doing, how they're betraying their constituents and their voters, and then what to do about it, come next election time. That is something we're definitely missing.
Yeah, for sure. For all of the criticism that anyone could put on, President Trump, for instance, the one thing that I think inspired folks to vote for him. One of the reasons I voted for him is he's a big middle finger to the establishment. He was like, you know what, something is rotten in Washington D.C., and it's these guys who have been in control for a long time. And again, you can criticize him for a lot of things, but one of the best things he ever did was expose what was going on in Washington D.C. in our politics, and he inspired people to action. That's the way forward, right? I mean, I don't care what your movement is. You have to expose people on what's going on the truth and what's going on, and then get them to do something meaningful. And in this case, it's through elections, right? If we threw, I mean, imagine if those 20 brave souls in Washington who held up McCarthy, imagine if instead of 20, there were 200. We had 200 people in the Republican conference who acted like Matt Gaetz, Lauren Boebert, Andy Biggs, all those guys. Imagine if we had those people in our majority of our Republican Congress. Washington, D.C. would be changed overnight. We need
Right.
more people like that. And that's precisely the problem, is that most of the people who are elected right now in Congress or anywhere, they don't tell the truth. They go back to their districts and they talk a great game. They talk about how they're conservative or how they're going to limit government or shrink government, but then they don't do it because they know that you're too busy. You're too busy not to pay attention. You're trying to run a business. You're trying to go to work, raise the kids, put food on the table. You're interested in all sorts of stuff, right? So you don't have a chance to really sit down and understand what's going on. In Washington or in Denver, so you're relying on people who you think are honest to tell you, really what's going on, but they're not honest, and that's what they count on. They count on you being ignorant and apathetic. So our goal should be to help you not be ignorant and give you something meaningful to do, so that we can reform the system.
Wow. Yeah, that's very inspirational, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, that kind of spells out the grand strategy or a great game plan for retaking Colorado, retaking the country, restoring liberty and freedom that we have. But what about the legislators who are currently serving? You said there's some great liberty leaders right now in the state legislature here in Colorado and the ones in Congress. What advice do you have for them? What advice do you have for the good legislators serving right now in the state of Colorado, surrounded
Hmm.
by so much other establishment Republicans and surrounded by this authoritarian Democratic special interest run group?
Fight the fights that need to be fought, but go back to your districts often. One of the biggest problems with our politicians there are many of them, do go into it with good intentions, but then they go into that environment where they're surrounded by lobbyists. I mean, if you take a map of the Capitol, I can point out a lot of headquartered places where there's just lobbyists surrounding the Capitol like it's an invading army, right? I mean, there are special interests, there are lobbyists, there are a whole host of folks that are their whole job is to make you feel great about yourself. They butter you up so that you do ultimately what they want. And if they don't butter you up, they'll threaten you, in which case you're gonna be motivated to do what they want. So get out of the environment as often as possible and go talk to your constituents and be with the people that you're supposed to be representing. It's easy to kind of forget who the people are, because when you're one person representing 100,000 people, that's a faceless proposition, right? There's no, what does that mean? It's nebulous, it's vague. I represent the people. Well, go to the people, get in front of them, go talk to your neighbors, go talk to your fellow churchgoers, or go talk to the parents, that you're interacting with at a soccer game, with your kid. Get get involved with those people, because that's real life. The Capitol is not real life. So that's number one. Be in touch, be grounded with the people that you're supposed to be fighting for and protecting. Number two, fight the fights that you got to fight, right? We have a major gun battle that we're going to have in the legislature. We're not likely to win it because, again, 46 Democrats in the House, 19 Republicans in the House, and then, of course, 23 Democrats in the Senate to 12 Republicans. We don't have the numbers to stop it, but that doesn't mean that we don't fight. We need to make it as painful as possible for them to pass what they're going to pass. And that's not just on the gunfight, but that's on all sorts of other fights that are going to be coming down down our throats very soon. Make the case, right? We can't have our way, but we can certainly have our say, right? That's the old axiom in the House and the Senate, is that you can make the case, right? So every time they take away our liberty, make the Democrats pay a political price. Talk about how these bag fees, right? These ridiculous bag fees are actually not helping anyone. They're making it harder for folks to be able to live their lives. I mean, talk about that. Talk about how, yeah, the gun bill could very well end up killing the single mom or the college age gal who just wants to protect themselves. Talk about how this ridiculous scheme to require people to essentially purchase a program to get a driver's license is going to disproportionately impact the poor or people of color. Let's talk about these things. Talk about the real world consequences and pin it on the Democrats, because they're the ones in power. Let the voters know what's going on, and then work with people on the outside, on the outside of the building, who are motivated to help organize folks to kick these people out of office. Really, if we want to be successful, we need our good politicians in the legislature to fight the good fight and make the case, and then partner with outside organizations so that we can educate the people and then get them to unelect these bums that are stealing our money and our freedom.
Yeah, I mean, that's great advice, and I think you keep bringing up the issue of organization, and I've thought that for a while, that Colorado's not a blue state. These policies the Democrats are proposing are not better than the more conservative or liberty policies. Instead, they're just more organized. They have
Mhm.
organization based on money, volunteers, and they're, for lack of a better word, grooming candidates for office, picking
Right.
them at low levels and feeding them up through the system, and then pushing them all the way up as high as they can go. So it seems like there is a strong need for organization, and I don't know, it's interesting. A lot of people have been looking to the party or to the Republican Party for that organization, but it seems like that hasn't worked out too well either.
Right. I mean, the Republican Party is limited in what it can do. Really, the Republican Party, if you look at because the major parties are heavily regulated, right? And it's from how they operate to, the amount of money they can even bring in. So if you look at the state statute, all they really can do is provide ballot access, to candidates, and that's important, right? Because not everyone can drop $20,000 to go get petition signatures, right? So going through the party caucus system really equalizes the playing field and allows grassroots candidates to go through a system that gets them onto the ballot cheaper and faster than they normally would. It also allows for the voter who's engaged in that process to actually meet the politician. I think that's one of the benefits and pluses of Colorado's system. We have a hybrid system where you can go through caucus, get on the ballot that way, or petition on. A lot of times with the petition process, you have people hire petition gatherers, and so the candidate's not actually interacting with the people when they go get their signatures. But in the caucus system, if you want to get a vote, you have to go actually talk to those people. You have to look them in the eye and make them promises on how you're gonna treat them better than the other candidate. That's the wonderful thing about the caucus. It's a truly grassroots process that allows anyone, regardless of their wealth, to compete. But with respect to the party overall, the answer to our problem is not the Republican Party organization. And it's going to include affiliated Republicans, right? So if you're a Republican voter, we can't win without you. But it's gonna require those Republican voters helping to identify and encourage their neighbors, whether they be unaffiliated or even maybe Democrats, to vote differently and vote for more liberty-minded, freedom-loving conservatives. The Republican Party, especially after facing the historic losses that we've incurred, is going to be hard pressed to actually fundraise a lot of money. You know, not just because of the campaign finance limitations, but also because of the fact that no one thinks they can win. That's going to be a hard proposition to organize under the Republican Party banner. I'll say this, there's a place for the Republican Party, and we need to work with the Republican Party in order to get the change that we want, but that they are not going to be the entirety of the solution going forward. We need to work with many different groups and build coalitions with different issue type organizations, whether it be RMGO, right? Could be RMGO, could be the Colorado State Shooting Association, right? It doesn't pick whatever organization you want that's trying to advocate for these good things. You need to work with all of them, because in order to win in politics, you got to win through addition. You got to win through coalition building. So it's going to take working with pro-life groups, pro-gun groups, the Republican Party, Colorado Union of Taxpayers, right? All of us are going to have to pull together in order to win, but that's going to require someone, really not just someone, but a segment of our coalition, organizing folks, bringing together, putting together a vision, having funding for it. I mean, this all doesn't work if we don't have funding. Democrats are going to have millions of dollars at their disposal. We need to be able to have some amount of money that allows us to compete. Otherwise, this won't work.
Right. No, it makes perfect sense. It's unbelievable. I've been doing some research on the 2022 election results and just seeing the amount of money that's been pouring into state legislative races. I know I've heard from, a state senator who lost that they spent $400,000 against him in his last 10 days of the election. I mean, it's absurd. It's congressional, senatorial, governor. I mean, it's like the biggest races you can imagine 10 years ago. That
Right.
money's now being spent on local, state house races. So, that makes it extremely difficult for somebody to compete. And maybe we
Right.
can work smarter because we're not going to have the resources that the Democrats have. So figuring out a way to work smarter and be more strategic about how we get our candidates elected.
Right. Well, I think it's important to stress why that money is being spent on a state legislator race. And it's because I think the Democrats have figured out that, yeah, there's power in Washington, D.C., but there's immense power in the state legislature. And, I think this goes hand in hand with the founding principles of our country, right? The founding fathers, they thought that the most powerful institutions or politicians would be those who are closest to you, right? Your city councilor, your state legislator, your sheriff, your county officials. Those were the ones who were supposed to have extreme power compared to those jokers in Washington. And I think the Democrats have figured out that, hey, we may not be able to get an assault weapons ban passed in Washington, but we could sure as hell get it passed in Colorado, right? And that's sort of the thinking that I to their credit, they've adopted. And we as Republicans have to be as vigorous and as motivated to take over these state legislative races that are not as sexy. They're not as sexy as a congressional race. I get that, but they're in a lot of ways they're more important because you can do a lot of damage for a fraction of the cost when you're dealing with 65 House representatives in Colorado or 35 senators in the Senate, as opposed to 435 congressmen in the House and another 100 in the Senate. It's just I mean, there's a return on investment that you can get greater if you play in local politics, and that's why you're seeing millions of dollars being thrown at these races, because you can get results quicker and faster in the state capital than you ever could in Washington. So if we're going to be successful, we got to get serious about winning these local races, and the money's out there. You know, the Senate Republicans, they fundraised about $15 million or so to try and win races this past go around. Did they spend it right? Maybe not. I mean, I guess the elections kind of speak for themselves, right? I mean, they lost big time. They spent $15 million to lose two seats. They didn't gain anything. They lost 2 seats after spending $15 million. We probably need a new strategy. That's the nicest way I think anyone could put it. We need a new plan, probably new people to actually implement that plan, and be a little bit wiser with our donor dollars. So the money exists. We just got to spend it better and do it in a way that's more effective.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And I do think there's an incredible opportunity for new leadership across Colorado, liberty-minded individuals who have a vision, who have a plan and a strategy that can be effective. It's time for a new perspective, maybe, and time to bring some new people in and see what we can do. That's I agree with you completely on that. So it's just sticking with the state legislature, kind of wrapping up that train of thought. What are some of your fondest memories, I guess, of working at the state legislature, serving at the Capitol? What are some of them, and maybe not fondest is the right word, but what are some of the
Sure.
memories that kind of stick out? What comes to mind?
Right, right. Oh man, there was a lot of stuff. I mean, it's a privilege serving in that building. I don't know if the statistic's right, but I think it is. I think only 2,000 or so people have actually served in the state legislature during the history of our state. So it's an honor. It's something that you know people should take seriously, and really have reverence for. I got to I mean, the place I worked in, it was an opulent place, right? I used to make fun of it, but there's also, if you really think about it, there's a humility that should um, come with, serving in that capacity, because you're walking into a building that's made of stone, that has all this unique granite and marble, and there's gold, there's all sorts of things that are supposed to be a testament to a free society and our democratic process. It's a wonderful experience, right? So just serving in the building itself and being able to be a voice for 100,000 folks is an experience that most people will never ever get to have. And that in and of itself is certainly something that sticks out. But with respect to individual circumstances, there were lots of fun times where I was in debate, with the Democrats, and they would break a rule, or they would try to silence the minority. And being the assertive person I wasn't going to stand for it, so I would have a bill read at length, right? Yeah, you bet. If we were having a 1 hour debate, at least that's what the Democrats wanted, I'd make it a 2 hour debate if they really pissed me off, right? Because I have a job to do, right? I'm here to represent 100,000 folks. I'm here to make sure, because they elected me. These people elected me on the platform that I ran on, and that platform was one of freedom and liberty. And I wasn't about to let the Democrats silence me. I wasn't about to let them get away with their schemes without a fight. So yeah, I was going to slow down the process. I was going to throw sand in the gears of government, because it was the right thing to do. And those were some of the fondest memories. I remember my first year. It was my first year. We were debating over the budget, and I wanted to have a vote on an amendment. I don't even remember what the amendment was, but I wanted to vote on an amendment. And the Democrats ruled my amendment out of order, and I said, "That's it. Read the bill at length." And the bill was like a 500-page bill, and it was going to take a while to read it. And everyone on the Democrat side, they were saying, "Oh, Dave's throwing a temper tantrum. He's not serious." But their whining then soon turned into bargaining. They were like, "Okay, Dave, what can we do to get you to stop?" And I was like, "I just want to vote. Give me a vote on my amendment and I'll stop." And then they really didn't want to do that. But about a half an hour later, they gave in. And they said, "Okay, Dave, you can have your vote. Just call this off." And so I called it off, and I got to have my vote. I lost my vote, but the principle mattered, right? I wanted honest debate. I wanted debate over something that I thought was um, important and in line with the process that we have. And it wasn't too much for me to ask for a recorded vote on where these people stood on that issue. The unfortunate part of it is I had Republicans actually try to get me to stop what I was doing as well. So that kind of tells you that just because they're Republican doesn't mean they want to slow government down. And those are some of the other things that stick out to me too. I mean, I'll give you something that wasn't so fond, right? I was in a caucus meeting, and I'll protect names right now. But those of you who are still in the legislature, I'm keeping an eye on you, and I reserve the right to expose you. But there was one time I was in a caucus meeting, and this was during COVID, and the stimulus package had passed, and Governor Polis, he was at his mansion surrounded by other legislators, including our minority leader at the time for the House and the Senate, talking about how this is a great thing. We're going to figure out how we're going to spend all this money from Washington, and we're going to do it in a bipartisan way. And you had, of course, our minority leadership and other Republicans who wanted to do that. So I got mad and I called a caucus meeting. I was like, guys, let's talk about this because this is way unprincipled, right? We are actually entertaining the thought of spending money we don't have, money that's coming from our grandchildren's grandchildren, right? This debt spending that's only going to cause more inflation and hurt people. We're actually entertaining spending it with Democrats. So let's talk about that principally, number one. And number two, let's talk about this politically. This doesn't make sense that we would help Democrats pass their agenda, because inevitably those Democrats are going to campaign on that agenda. They're going to say, we're so wonderful that we got this passed. We're so great. We're even so great to the point that the Republicans agreed with us. So please reelect us. And of course, that's absolutely what they did. But I remember having the caucus meeting and making this case, and people saying, admitting that I was right. But the most disheartening response I ever got was from a fellow Republican legislator who said, I know what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying, but they're going to pass that bill. And if they're going to pass that bill, I need my name on it because it's good for my district. And that pretty much sums up the problem, with the legislature and specifically with Republicans in the legislature, is that they're willing to sacrifice our long-term success and prospects for short-term gain for themselves. So that certainly sticks out. And I think that's what a lot of my liberty-minded colleagues had to deal with when they were in there. And of course, the people that are in there now who are trying to do what's right, they have to not only fight Democrats, but they also have to fight fellow Republicans who are not in it for the movement. They're in it for themselves. And what's sad about this is that there are a lot of people in positions of influence and power who can educate the public about these realities, but don't. And they don't do it because I think they themselves benefit from this system. They get access to people, right? I mean, look at any influencer in Colorado or even nationally. They get access to these very politicians who are not interested in changing anything, but they get access so they can have interviews, right? They can have interviews and talk about sort of the political intrigue and what's happening. They can, have these individuals host fundraisers for their organization. So, I mean, really, there's a big systemic problem within Colorado and nationally where you kind of have people who are able to reach a lot of folks, giving a wink and a nod to the very people that are ruining our country. I got a front row seat to it, and that was sad. That person was a rural legislator, and the response that I gave was, it would be good for your district is a Republican majority. That'd be really good for your district, right? But of course, that's a long-term prospect. It's not in front of him, and he didn't agree. So, that's something I would point out to folks that they need to know, and certainly something that won't go away. But my best experiences that I ever had in the legislature was actually helping out individual constituents, especially during COVID, where people were, because of the lockdowns, they were unemployed and they needed unemployment assistance. And a lot of times these people weren't getting um, their unemployment checks because of some sort of problem with the labor department. And so, me as a legislator, I was able to make a phone call or send an email and get a move on them getting these people the relief they needed. So situations like that, those were really fulfilling when you could actually see someone, hear someone, and address their issue and make it work. And those are the memories that I'll always cherish because I think ultimately, if you're going to find fulfilling and meaning in your life, a big part of that's going to come from service to others. So, if any of your listeners want to really do well and good in this world, figure out a way that you can help someone, because that's the stuff that's really going to leave a lasting legacy.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's what it's all about in the end, right? Why we care about liberty or why we care about freedom and trying to create a better world for ourselves and our families is, wanting the best for people and wanting things to be just a little bit brighter out there.
Right.
I did hear a recent story about you. In the state house on your desk, apparently there was some sort of hammer or something like this that one of the other legislators did not like,
Mhm.
I guess. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. I do. I know this very well. This I will expose the legislator because he's a godless Democrat. So whatever. No, Tom Sullivan, the guy who wants to take away your right to protect yourself, was upset because I had a replica Thor hammer on my filing cabinet. And for those of you who don't know, I'm into pop culture. I like the Marvel movies. And so, I just wanted to spruce up my working environment. So I brought a replica Thor hammer. He complained about that potentially being a weapon of some sort that could harm him, as if I would take a toy, because that's what it is. It was a toy, or not me or someone else. Anyone on the Republican side would take a toy and somehow harm him or any of his colleagues. He freaked out about it. We had a bit of you know, an interesting conversation on the floor over it. He complained to the majority leader at the time, and I think at the end of the day, everyone kind of just they heard him, right? They were kind enough to hear his concerns, but more or less kind of shrugged it off and was like, well, no, right? We're not we're not going to tell a sitting legislator what he can have, what kind of decorations he can have on his desk or not, right? So yeah, it was a silly thing, and I think ever since it's left a it's definitely put a wedge between me and now Senator Sullivan. I don't think we're going to be getting a beer anytime soon as a result.
Man, yeah, this guy's so anti-gun and so delusional that he's afraid that Thor's hammer is going to somehow strike him down, you know?
It's the craziest thing. I mean, I really feel for the guy. I don't know. I mean, he's gone through a traumatic experience, no question, right? He has every right to feel the way he feels, even though I disagree with the policy pursuits that he would achieve. Um, but I think there's something, where there's something going on inside him that he really does. He needs love. He needs some healing, right? For him to really be concerned or afraid that a replica toy from a Marvel fictional character was somehow going to be a threat to him or others, kind of shows the some of the extreme personalities that are in control of your life at the government level. I mean, these guys they're empowered to pass bills, and this is the type of thinking that they have. And it's not just Sullivan. There's a lot of other folks that, may not be afraid of Thor's hammer, but they're just as triggered, so to speak, over a whole host of ridiculous things, right? I mean, there are people there who really think because you're a white male that you're a threat to them, and they have to do everything they can to include, passing legislation to level the playing field. It's racist. They don't consider it racism. They couch it in other terms. They call it being woke, but it's just pure racism. And those are the people that are in charge right now.
Wow. Yeah, I get the impression that especially in the 2023 legislature, there's a lot more crying going on than there used to be.
You probably, I thought it couldn't get worse when we were when we were down to 24. I can't imagine what it's like with 19 Republicans and 46, socialist woke folks that, they're just outraged at everything, right? There's a problem for everything, or for every solution that they want to put forward, right? That's this I feel bad for not only Coloradans, but specifically the people on the front lines that have to try and combat it, because they're not going to win, really at all. Just the numbers don't allow for it. So, the best thing I can suggest, apart from everything else that I've suggested already, is that if you're in the minority, try to run out the clock. The best weapon you have at this point is the calendar, it's time. So if you can slow everything down and maybe just, prevent the Democrats from having enough time to pass everything they want, then do that.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great advice. So, these liberty legislators, I hope they take a lot of your advice to heart, and I think it's some great information for them, especially future legislators or people who want to run for state office. So, moving on a little bit to elections, I'd love to talk to you. I mean, you have a lot of experience, obviously, working campaigns yourself and helping other people on their campaigns. So, regarding elections, because that's part of what we've talked about, getting more liberty people elected to office, getting the right people elected is what's going to change our state and really make a big difference. So what advice would you give to someone who is running for office?
Well, the best advice I would give is that really what it comes down to if you want to win an election, you have to fundraise well, and you have to win over voters, right? It seems very obvious, but a lot of candidates actually don't do that. There's a lot of candidates who keep going to the same Rotary meeting, right? Every Saturday or every other Saturday, thinking that somehow that by being there and giving a speech, they're going to get elected. It just doesn't work that way. I tell candidates all the time that campaigning is not glamorous. It's actually it's a very arduous, tough proposition. Because I think candidates watch movies or television programs where they see a whole group of folks just listening to a politician give a speech at a podium, and they think to themselves, "Oh, I just have to give the next Gettysburg Address, and I'm going to get elected." Right? That's not how politics works, right? Politics works by asking people to give you money so that you can reach more people, right? You have to either win a dollar or win a vote. And that's what I tell candidates all the time. And that involves getting on the phone, that involves knocking on people's doors, meeting them where they're at, that involves putting money together and putting it into a solid mass communication program, whether it be TV, mail, email, phone calling, banking. That's how you win elections, is by delivering your message consistently at the right time to the right people. And you can only do that by asking people to either volunteer or donate or vote for you. If those people can do that, they're gonna win most of the time. If you out hustle your opponent, you'll typically win. It's not rocket science. It's a pain in the rear. And I think, to be fair to new candidates, they don't know. Now, I remember the first time I wanted to get in politics, I didn't know what to do. So I did the only thing that a novice at the time would do, which I think everybody tends to do. Oh, I'll just go to the local party and figure out how to get plugged in, right? And there was benefit to that. I mean, getting to meet other like-minded folks, that was truly beneficial. But I assure you, the party's not going to get you elected. Because I mean, if the last election cycle is any any indication, they don't know how to get elected themselves. So, the best thing you can do is figure out the voters who are going to vote in your district and start marketing to them why you're a better servant for them as opposed to the other options that are going to come around. The other thing I would encourage people that may not want to run but they want to help someone is find someone that you like and help them out. Volunteers are precious commodities, and you'd be surprised at how quickly you can climb the ladder, so to speak, with any sort of campaign, right? I remember there's always some story where someone starts out as I don't know, like a phone banker or someone who writes emails or something like that, and then 3 months later they're the campaign manager, right? I mean, that if you help some candidate and they're finding success, they're going to remember that, and they're going to trust you, and they're going to want to bring you with them as they try to make change and gain political power. Also, I would recommend that any gun group, pro-life group, limited tax group like Cut, if you guys really want to make a difference, go find candidates, go recruit, identify, and train these candidates up. Because I got to tell you, one of the hardest things for our movement and the liberty movement is finding people that want to do this crap. Um, you know, this sort of showcases the difference between those who like liberty and those who like not liberty, right? Tyranny, I guess. Is that these people that want to be in government, they have a desire to run for office. They're the ones that want to be in control. They want power, right? But guys like us who are liberty minded, we don't like government. And so the thought of being involved in government is something that we just detest, or we don't even think of at first, because we want to go pursue business interests or some other meaningful vocation or something like that. And we don't think about it. We don't have that desire. And the best thing you can do is try to convince someone who doesn't want to run for political office to actually run for political office, because normally the best people who are suited for power are those who don't seek it.
100%, yeah. And I really like what you said about getting involved with campaigns. If somebody wants to run for office and wants to know how a campaign works, well, there's no better education than volunteering for somebody's campaign. If you're there from day one and see how the entire process unfolds, and maybe they lost, maybe they won, but you at least learned how it works and what they could have done differently. That's invaluable experience that you could use for when you decide to run for office, for your own race, your own campaign.
Absolutely.
So I think that's huge. And yeah, I mean, the idea of organization keeps coming up, and that's completely on board with that idea that we need to have a better organized movement, I guess is the way to put it. And it's difficult, right? With people who believe in liberty, like you said, they're going to church, they're raising families, they're running businesses. Everybody's got their own, and they're independent minded too, I think is a very important aspect to that as well, where we don't necessarily agree with everybody. We just want to be left alone and live our own lives and pursue our dreams. So to be pulled into an organized effort where you have to almost sacrifice some of your time and your money and your ability to do what you want to do with your life for this greater cause is a challenge to get people there, but
And I
the Democrat, yeah, go ahead.
I just piggyback off that. I think guys like us who are involved in politics, I think it's incumbent upon us to create a culture of helping people to realize that this is a worthy pursuit, right? Running for office or helping someone to run for office is something that you should think about, right? It doesn't mean that you want power, but you recognize that it's necessary our our like-minded liberty folks to take power. Because if we don't take power, the other side is going to take power, and they're gonna force you to buy plastic bags at a grocery store for 10 cents a pop until they eventually ban it next year, right? I mean, these are the policies that are going to be passed if we don't step up. So, I know it's kind of a losing proposition because we don't like government to begin with, but we either be a part of it or we let someone else, be a part of it who then rules our affairs. So
Oh, yeah.
get involved, take power away, and prevent the big government tyrants from getting it.
Yeah, and the call is more urgent than ever. I mean, it's unbelievable where they're going with some of the policies. I can't believe some of the bills they've introduced this year, whether it's rent control or this idea of a fair work week, where a business has to tell their employees weeks in advance what their schedule is going to be and give them all this written notice. I mean,
Crazy.
it's becoming a Soviet type system where everything's so highly regulated. There's no room for entrepreneurship. There's no room for imagination and creativity.
Right.
And by limiting the marketplace like that, they're just impoverishing all of society by trying to tightly control everything because they don't know any better. And the beauty of the market is multiple solutions are presented for a single problem, and the best one's going to win most of the time, as long as the government doesn't get in the way. So yeah, the call is more urgent than ever in terms of what they're trying to do. I started getting involved in politics around the 2013 gun control that happened back then and the recalls and volunteering at that point, and met some great people and saw that there was a liberty movement here of people who thought like me and are willing to go out there and work for freedom. So it's inspirational, that there is this culture already, but it does need to be grown. It does need to be developed and fostered, and it's got to be a little bit. I don't know. There needs to be support for people, I guess, in a way, some organized support effort for these candidates, for people who want to run for office. And that's maybe what people think the party, like we've talked about, people think that's what the party does. It's not necessarily the case.
Right.
So yeah, there's definitely a need for that. So talking about, candidates and people running for office. So why, in your opinion, why did the Colorado Republicans do so poorly in the 2022 midterm elections? Was it because of spending primarily? Maybe it was strategy. Was it the talking points? Was it what caused Republicans to lose?
Right. Well, there's not one thing that caused them to lose. And in fact, if you really want to know why we lost in 2022, you have to go all the way back to the mid 2000s, right? This has been a long time coming. It's not just one event or one thing that caused us to have the wildly disproportionate balance of power that we find ourselves in right now. Really what it comes down to is a combination of things. If I could summarize, maybe in 3 or 4 points what it is and expand from there, I will. But generally, it's the Democrats got their act together mid 2000s, right? This is the blueprint, right? Or Rocky Mountain Heist, the thing that talks about the blueprint. These folks got together and they realized if we're going to win, we have to put a lot of money behind our message and then go tell the voters why we're better suited for power and why the Republicans are a bunch of no good so and so devils, right? They did that beautifully, and they won. They won, and they did it when the Republicans didn't think it was possible. It's always a perfect example of why human beings tend to fight yesterday's wars, right? No one in the 2000s, mid 2000s, the Republicans that were in charge, they never dreamed that someone would fundraise multiple millions of dollars to take out Republican incumbents and win a majority, but they did, right? They didn't see it coming, and they were kind of warned about it, but they didn't think it was possible, or they didn't think it was going to happen. It happened. And so when they took over power, they started passing the policy agendas that they wanted to pass, and that helped them solidify their power a little bit more, right? Success breeds success. And so they keep passing policies, they keep getting money because their donors are seeing success, and they keep recruiting good candidates, and they keep putting money behind good program and beating up on Republicans, and they just keep doing this consistently for 20 years. And they have a well-oiled machine. They have not only a strong party in their own right, but they also have third-party groups that help recruit or identify and recruit and train candidates. So they develop their bench. They have multi-millionaire, billionaire types that fund their operation because, one, they believe in the cause, but two, because they have access to the taxpayer coffers, right? So there's a return on investment for those people. So that's why they have no shortage of money. They also have consultants that are far and away better than our consultants, right? So they're strategists, they're brain trust, they're brass. they're better equipped to win elections because they understand voters better than our guys do. You contrast that with our side. Our side was asleep at the switch. They lost, and now we're trying to play catch up. But we didn't even really play catch up with them, right? We kept putting forward milquetoast candidates that were uninspiring and that refused to throw a punch. One of the big reasons why Jared Polis is popular is because Republicans really don't make him accountable to the stupid things that are going on in Colorado. They don't actually paint devil horns on him and say, this man is corrupt, this man is evil, we need to get rid of him. They don't do that. Republicans, for whatever reason, in Colorado are afraid of their own shadow, and they really don't make the case. And if they do make the case, it's 2 months before an election. If we wanted to defeat Jared Polis, for example, we needed to not only fundraise money, but for the past 4 years, the very second that he was sworn in, as governor, we had to beat him up every single day. Our guys didn't do it. You know why? Because our guys thought that they could somehow sweet talk their way to a majority. They thought that they could drip honey in the ears of voters and the Democrats and win policy concessions and somehow through positivity become the people that should be in charge. When in fact, that's not what happened. If you go back 20 years ago and you see how Democrats won, they did it by calling us evil, by going negative, by talking about how we should be fired, by positioning us against the will of the people. It's no secret. It's not rocket science. You have to do that in order to win. So if Republicans want to win, they kind of do need to engage in the fundamentals that the Democrats demonstrated 20 years ago. But here's the problem. Democrats are not continuing to do what they've done 20 years ago. They've innovated. They've developed new strategies. They developed new tactics that complement the fundamentals of campaigning. Republicans still have not done that. They still haven't even figured out that that if we're going to win, that we need to actually ballot harvest. Right? Ballot harvesting has been a thing since mail-in balloting has come about. I think it was 2014. That was the first election where we had mail-in ballots. Democrats have been ballot harvesting for about 8 years now. Republicans are now just starting to talk about it, right? I don't like ballot harvesting, but I'll tell you right now, it's you can legally ballot harvest. You can go to folks and you can say, hey, let me help get your ballot in the ballot box well before election day. The fact that we don't do that it's always going to be a handicap for us, right? With respect to this cycle specifically, we had $15 million go into a singular effort, and that was to win back the Senate majority. I don't know about you, but in business, we're taught that you should diversify your portfolio, not put all your eggs in one basket. I assure you that if money was a little bit distributed to other efforts, we might have had different outcomes. So in the House, for example, there was a gentleman by the name of Kurt Huffman. He lost by about, 300, 400 votes to a Democrat in Highlands Ranch. Imagine if we took $100,000 of that $15 million and spent it on Kurt Huffman winning his seat. Probably would have made a difference. We'd be looking at 20 Republicans versus 19. Take, for instance, Colin Larson. I don't like that guy. I don't like him at all. In fact, I think it's his loss is a large result of his own inaction. He took his seat for granted. But it's still a valid argument to say, had we taken $100,000 of the $15 million that was spent totally on Senate Republicans and protected Colin Larson, we'd be looking at 20 or 21, right? If we did it for Kurt Huffman, right? I mean, there are close races where we could have won. Rob, on the Senate, let's talk about the mismanagement of Senate funds, apart from allocating resources. Rob Woodward, that guy, it was a very close race. They didn't spend any money on him. because they took it for granted. They figured that Rob had enough money on his own and they wanted to go focus on some of these other races. And they left him to his own efforts, and he lost, right? That could be 13, not 12, right? I mean, there's so many things that you could look at, right? In hindsight's 2020. I don't want to beat up on these guys. But I think the problem here is that we're not focused on the fundamentals. We're not focused on beating up on Democrats. We're not focused on looking for ways to defend what we have and then be smart about expanding our efforts. I mean, truth be told, we were never going to win the Senate back. The second that Kevin Priola switched parties was enough to tell you right there, we weren't going to win. Even in the best scenarios, we were never going to get the Senate back. So that should have informed us on how we actually, allocate money and spend on races. Let's just take, for example, the races that we spent money on, but we really had no business, spending money in. Probably, God, you'll forgive me, but Tom Sullivan's race, that was probably a losing battle right off the bat. There was another race, I forget the exact, but it was Lisa Cutter. That was probably a losing proposition too. To be fair to the Senate, brain trust there, those guys, spent where they thought they could theoretically win, right? So, because you have to spend money somehow, right? So that's what they did. The problem is they weren't honest, I think, with their donors. The truth was we were unlikely to win the Senate. That's just the truth. Even with the good year, we were unlikely to win back the Senate. So a part of the solution moving forward is being honest with donors and voters that Colorado we're not going to turn this thing around in one cycle. It's going to be a couple of cycles, several cycles before we can really get back to par. And so what the Senate Republicans, probably should have done is they probably should have defended the 15 they had, make sure that you spend enough money to maintain what you got. And then if you can go after one or two seats, go after them. But given the map, given the dynamics of the field, that wasn't likely. The problem is that when you're fundraising, you can't tell donors, we're going to lose, right? There's not a good chance that we're going to win. So they were really in a tough position. And that's why I would advocate for distributing, the investments, right? Diversifying the portfolio, trying to protect and maintain seats in the state house, and ensuring that maybe we can win one or two, with the understanding we won't get the majority, but we can have a more effective minority. That would have been probably a more honest and better effort. Number two, right, getting away from the state legislature, taking some of that 15 million and putting it towards CD8. That was an extremely close race. By all accounts, to the lead up of the election, even the Democrats will admit this, they thought Barb Kirkmeyer had the edge, had the advantage. She didn't. How much? $100,000 more, $200,000 more, anything, and we might have been able to win that seat. Lauren Boebert almost lost that race, and I think it's because a lot of people took for granted that there was no way that Aspen Adam could somehow come within 500 votes and win, but he did, and I think that tells you a little bit about what's going on statewide. There is a deep mistrust of the Republican brand. There really is, and I don't blame them, because what's the point in voting for a bunch of Republicans that aren't actually going to do anything about anything? Why would anyone trust us? We don't actually follow through on the promises we make. If you don't do that, then no one's going to vote for you. If you don't contrast yourself with the Democrats, why would anyone vote for you? I mean, look at Joe O'Dea. Joe O'Dea basically said, hey, I'm going to be like Michael Bennet. Okay, why would I vote for you? I could vote for Michael Bennet. Of course, the consultants with these geniuses, they don't think like that. They don't think like the voter. They think these guys are amateurs in that they think the best way to win is to moderate your position. Come to the center, because they work off the proposition that all of these swing voters are left-leaning in principle. When in fact, the truth is They're not ideologically driven. That's why they're unaffiliated. If they were right, they would more likely than not be a Republican. If they were left, they would more likely and are not affiliate with the Democrats. They don't like either party. They think they're all a bunch of crooks. They're not ideologically driven. And so that's why when these folks advise some of these richer candidates, they advise them improperly. They tell them right off the bat what they want to hear, because these rich, wealthy folks, they think to themselves, "Oh my God, the electorate, they're left leaning. I got to be left leaning." And so the consultants come in and they say, "Yep, you're right. They're left leaning. Pay me enough money, and I'll craft a message that's left leaning so that you can win over the votes." That's not how politics works. These guys do not, the voters we're trying to win over do not like Republicans or Democrats. That's why they're unaffiliated. What they are looking for is someone that they like, right? Can I grab a beer with you? Someone they think is honest, right? So someone who's going to care about me. I may disagree with them, but do I think they're going to have the best interests at heart? And they're looking to avoid someone they think is just a creep, right? So Democrats, that's how they campaign. They say, this person is so wonderful. This person is so nice. This person's so great. Look at the accomplishments they have. Now look at this bastard, right? Look at this Republican who, you wouldn't ever want him or her watching your children. They're evil. Look at what they've done. They're such liars. You don't want to vote for them. That's campaigning messaging 1-on-1. And then they mix that messaging with ballot harvesting, right? They figured out that if you have multiple ballots out in circulation, their chances of winning go up. It's exactly why they don't want the traditional one day of voting where you go to a polling place, because their voters are not motivated to get off their couch and vote. That's why you got to give them a ballot. But then they also figured out that those same voters are not motivated to actually return the ballot in the mail. So you actually have to go to their door and ballot harvest it. That's what they figured out, right? I mean, there's so many things that have led to our election losses over the years and with respect to this cycle, that it's hard to just pinpoint it on one simple thing. It's a lot of different things that create this perfect storm. It's incompetence on the part of Republicans. It's weakness and cowardice on the part of Republicans, mixed in with a well-oiled machine with Democrats who are not afraid to throw a punch and who are well-funded. If we're going to win, the answer is to get back to fundamentals, to basically tell the truth about Democrats. Don't help them, because that's the tendency of these establishment Republicans, is to help them and be nice because they want to be viewed as nice people. They don't want to throw a punch, right? They want to be patted on the back by some local newspaper or some civic group that gives them an award, right? They want to be invited to the governor's mansion. They delight in being a part of the weekly meeting that the governor has with the leadership team in both caucuses, right? I mean, these people want access, right? That's the problem, is that they're trading power away for access, because ultimately they want to be viewed as a nice guy or a nice gal. Politics is a blood sport. It's warfare by other means. If we're going to win, we have to beat the enemy. That's it. If you don't do that, we're going to lose.
Exactly. Wow. Yeah, that very powerful message. 100%. A lot. I agree with you completely on all of this. It's a lot to take in, and I hope that people listen to you, and I hope these words are taken to heart among people who are wanting to fight for liberty in Colorado and want to restore our state to a more free place. Because the potential's there. I think it's possible. I'm really optimistic in terms of the capabilities of liberty and freedom to win in Colorado. Not, of course, overnight, like you said, but it's going to take some work, but inroads can be made. And I couldn't agree with you more too about demonizing, and maybe demonizing is the wrong word, but really exposing the records of these legislators. All these people who just got elected in 2022, now they just started in the legislature in 23. They need to be watched like hawks, especially on some of these tight districts where they're very highly competitive. And those legislators, I mean, need to be watched, and their records need to be exposed. and they need to become household names in their districts for how bad they are and how they're
Right.
attacking the working class and making life more expensive and more difficult and making it harder for you to do your job and to get to work and to raise children. The beauty of the Democrats, at least, is that they provide so much ammunition to be used against them because they have such terrible policies. So really watching them and kind of creating that narrative over the next 4 years for the Senate, or at least the senators who just got elected, and 2 years for the state house, and then of course all our local and county races across the state. But yeah, it's got to start now. I think like you said earlier, a lot of people wait to the last minute thinking that, oh, they get involved in the election, whether as an activist or as a candidate. Maybe starting a little too late has been a problem as well. Kind of being more of a full-time candidate for a longer period of time, I think could also make a big difference.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah. So, I mean, what do you see as some of the bigger issues that future candidates over the next election cycle should be focusing on? I think, the cost of living, of course, is a big issue. I think Republicans missed a big opportunity by not talking about the COVID tyranny that we experienced during 2020 and 2021. That was
Yeah.
a big failure. But what are some of the next issues or some of the next things that really candidates should be focusing on going into that next election cycle?
Well, I mean, big picture, we need to be focused on empowering folks to have more freedom in their own lives, right? I mean, the whole, the thing that we've been fighting all of human history, we've been fighting over, right, is freedom versus tyranny. Free people versus not free people, right? I mean, generally speaking, people want to be left alone to live the lives they want to live. They want to worship how they want to worship. They want to be able to engage in whatever commerce or activity they want to engage in. And that's usually a winning message, right? If anyone tells you that you can't do something, what's your first reaction? Like, well, who are you? Right? Like, who are you to tell me what I can do with my life? Right? That's already generally where voters are coming from anyway. Right? So I think there's a powerful sort of alignment that can occur with the voters if we simply engage in what they're already predisposed to do, and that's live the lives they want to live. Now, in terms of specific issues, the best thing a candidate can do, and maybe this is more for other outside or organizations to engage in, is to actually figure out where the voters are on issues, right? What are their most important issues? And so that's going to involve some polling. But still, if you want to know how to best serve a voter, you got to know what they think. And we can kind of guess it, but we won't really know unless we go out and we ask them. I can tell you the Democrats do this all the time, right? They spend massive amounts of money to poll or engage in focus groups and try to figure out what the voter likes so that they can position themselves to look like they're in alignment with that and then position Republicans against it. One of the best examples is healthcare. Healthcare is always a problem with anyone, right? No one likes getting, billing from a hospital that, from a service that they got 3 months ago, right? People hate that. Every time you deal with insurance companies or hospitals, anything related to healthcare, that's something that people are going to be thinking about. The challenge for us as conservatives and liberty-minded folks is that we don't believe that the solution is government. We believe the solution is free markets, right? So we have to come up with creative ways that not only align with the folks with voters on healthcare, right, in terms of making it more affordable and accessible, but we have to do it by not using the force of government, right? Because it's very easy if you're a Democrat and you say, you know what, I'm just going to magically wave my wand and say in this bill that prices are going to go down and you're going to have more access to healthcare. That's tangible. That's tangible, and you can go to a voter and you can say, hey, I'm doing exactly what you want. Never mind that it's never going to work, because that's not how life works. That's not how anything works, right? That's the challenge we're up against, is that we have to find ways to do it through freedom and free markets, and then still campaign that we're making a difference, which you can do, right? There's ways to accomplish this. One example I'll give you is Patrick Neville. His last year, he passed a price transparency bill that required hospitals to be transparent with the prices that they charge. Did he use a little bit of force of government? Sure, but on the whole, it was for the benefit of the free market, because if I don't know what you're charging and I don't know what the other competitor is charging, then I, as the consumer, have no idea who's being straight with me. I don't know how I can shop and get the best price. I got to know what the price is if I'm going to be able to actually choose which healthcare provider I want to go to. That on the whole expanded free markets because it requires us to know what we're even engaging in. That's a great piece of legislation that someone can actually campaign on and win on if they wanted to. So definitely healthcare would be something that is always of concern. Affordability is of generally speaking, right? The cost of eggs have risen dramatically, right? You're seeing the memes where people are making fun of the situation by putting eggs in a locked safe, right? It's because it's like they're gold or silver or some sort of precious metal that you have to protect. It's ridiculous that we have to do that. But maybe one solution could be to make it easier so that you can purchase a chicken and put it in your backyard. There's a lot of local municipalities that do regulate that kind of stuff, and if we opened it up for people to want to engage in little amateur farm raising of chickens so that they can have eggs in their backyard, why not? That's going to create more supply within the system and drive down costs, right? Reversing the stupid 10 cents bag fee, right? You could campaign on that with respect to making life more affordable. So yeah, there's that. There is a rising crime. Problem we do have in Colorado. So figuring out ways to make sure that we're punishing criminals while maintaining people's civil liberties is always something that you can campaign on. But these are just general things. And the other thing, and this kind of gets back into the previous question on why we lost. One of the problems that we had was the commitment to Colorado that the party put out. I'll give them an A for effort, so to speak, for trying to create some sort of cohesive message. But we have to understand that rarely does a top-down solution actually work. Keep in mind that the commitment to Colorado was sort of a one-size-fits-all messaging solution set for the entire state, and that's never going to work. My district, when I was still elected, I represented a military town, right? People in Weld County, yeah, they may love the military, but the concerns of having a base are absent in that area. In other words, not all districts are alike. So what may matter to a city slicker like me on the Front Range may have no bearing with someone who's on the Eastern Plains or the Western Slope. And so I think we also have to remember that it's got to be specific to the location that we're trying to be competitive in. So healthcare, that may not be an issue in the Denver metro area, right, or the suburban area where you have well-to-do or well-affluent voters, right? But it is probably a concern in a more economically depressed area that maybe in the rural communities they have really a big problem with having healthcare providers actually service those areas because it is more remote than not, right? I mean, there are so many issues that have to be focused in on that voting population of that geographical area in order to be successful. So that's the other caution I would say, is that there are some general things that you can kind of pinpoint, but there's also specific things that you really do need to tee off on because those voters care about it and maybe not, in another area. But yeah, generally speaking, jobs, the economy, healthcare. I think abortion is something we have to talk about. I think this is one of the missteps of Republicans generally. And I think it's because the establishment Republicans, one, don't really believe in the issue, but two, they're just afraid of getting punched in the face, right? They're afraid of mixing it up with Democrats. And I understand why they may not want to talk about it because they feel it's a losing issue. I don't think it is, but let's just, for sake of argument, go with their line of thinking. The problem in all of this is that the Democrats are going to talk about it, and you can't run away from it. No, I mean, look at Joe O'Dea. Joe O'Dea was clearly not a pro-life candidate, right? But what did the Democrats do? They said, well, he's a liar, right? That guy, he's he's just lying to you. He's not really pro-life. He's not really pro-choice. He's pro-life. He's horrible because he wants to lock up victims of rape and incest and all that, right? I mean, you can't, Republicans are not going to be able to run away from the pro-life message because it is a plank of our party, despite the best efforts of some of the establishment Republicans. So the best thing we can do is fight back on the issue. They're going to talk about it, and we can't keep getting punched in the face over it. We might as well punch back. And one of the things that I wished Heidi Ganahl would have done, God bless her. I mean, she took on an impossible task to go up against an incumbent Democrat who was, popular. I mean, he was popular in El Paso County. He was almost 50-50 in El Paso County, 50-50 when you look at some of the polls. That was a tough cat. One of the things I wish she would have done in a debate, for instance, is really go after Polis on how extreme he is on abortion. Right? Every time they talk about how we don't want to have exceptions, how we want to lock up victims of rape or incest and things like that. She was asked a question during the debate, would you restrict abortion? And her answer shouldn't have been, oh, no, I'm going to let the voters decide. That shouldn't have been the answer, because it actually plays into the talking points of the Democrats. Her answer should have been, you bet. You bet I'm going to restrict abortion, because I think it's horrible that Jared Polis wants to allow babies who are black to be killed just because they're black. I think it's horrible that Jared Polis wants to allow kids who have Down syndrome to be killed just because they have Down syndrome. Right? We shouldn't be allowing people to abort their children because they have some sort of genetic condition that's going to make them disabled after they're born, or not make them disabled, but they're going to have a harder life after they've been born, right? I think it's wrong that we should engage in sex selection abortion. Just because someone's a woman and that mom doesn't want to have a woman because she had hopes for having a boy, I think it's wrong that Jared Polis wants to kill little baby girls in the womb because they're girls, right? Start exposing them on how extreme they are and make them defend their crazy, wacky positions for a change. If we start throwing a punch, we're actually going to connect, because most people are going to agree with us on that. Oh, yeah, you're right. We shouldn't kill a baby because they're a girl. We shouldn't kill a baby because they have Down syndrome. Oh, that makes total sense. Okay, right. Okay, we're not talking about restricting all abortion in that instance, but we are agreeing that we shouldn't kill someone because they have some sort of genetic abnormality. This is just common sense, and our establishment guys who are in control right now, unfortunately, they never want to do this, and it boggles my mind, because like I said, Joe O'Dea, he couldn't escape it, right? If he couldn't escape what the Democrats were doing, then the logical thing would have been to, okay, readjust the fire, adjust the focus, and make the Democrat look extreme. Same thing could have been done with Michael Bennet. Yeah, Michael Bennet is nuts. He wants to kill babies because they're black. He wants to kill babies because they're a girl or a boy. He wants to kill babies because they have some sort of disability, right? I mean, talk about that stuff, and you're going to start gaining ground, right? Yeah, and by the way, voters, they don't agree that you should kill a baby all the way up until birth. They don't align with that. So talk about that. Yeah, I don't agree with Jared Polis that someone right before they give birth can just go ahead and engage in a brutal abortion procedure, whether it be chemical or through instruments that essentially tear apart the limbs of these children, right? I mean, talk about these things, right? Don't be afraid to engage it, because guess what? The Democrats are going to talk about it. And if you let them talk about it 100% of the time, you're probably going to lose. So wage war, fight on it.
Now, always be on the attack and don't back down and put it back on them. Yeah, I love it. I mean, that's great strategy. It's a great idea and great talking points, but of course that takes somebody with a spine, somebody with a backbone, somebody who's willing to fight back and be willing to be unliked, as well. Like you said, all these politicians want to be everybody's best friend and not necessarily willing to get dirty and to take hard stands because they're afraid. That's not why they're running for office, is to be demonized and attacked. They want to be loved.
They're people pleasers. I mean, that's why we have a crisis of leadership in this country and in the state, is because we have feckless leaders who aren't really leaders at all. They really just want to be politicians who are patted on the back and given awards occasionally, so that 10 years after they're out of office, they can tell their friends, hey, once upon a time I was an elected official. Right? These guys want to be all things to all people. And I think ultimately it highlights sort of their own character flaws. You have people that have deep insecurities that they feel they can only overcome if someone votes them into office.
Right.
We need to get rid of those people. We need to get them mental help, but we need to get them out of office for sure, because they're not looking out for you, they're looking out for themselves.
Definitely. Definitely. Well, Dave, what's next for you? After serving in the state legislature for 6 years and hearing your vision and your strategy and your ideas and your wealth of experience and knowledge, what's next on your plate?
The possibilities are endless, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that want me to run for state party chair. I don't know if I want to do that. I'm still weighing the pros and cons of it all, because that's a Herculean task for anyone who's going to take it, especially when you look at the 2024 prospects. It's going to be statistically impossible to take back the majority in either state legislative chamber, right? So you're not going to win the majority, right? And now you have to defend CD3, right? That's Lauren Boebert's district, because the Democrats, have shown that, hey, they can win even in that district. And then you still have to try and do what you can on CD8, because that's a competitive seat. Oh, and by the way, there's a presidential race that's going to be occurring in 2024. And, I suspect that Donald Trump's not going to be the only primary challenger for the nomination. There's a very fair chance that Ron DeSantis is going to do it. And, to be a party chair in that type of environment is going to be that's going to be a tough role, because you're gonna have to be a referee of sorts. You're gonna have to play it down the middle and be neutral. And folks know me. I've supported Trump for a long, long time, and I just know that if I were to become party chair, that some other campaign or some other group of folks are just going to accuse me of being, unfair or not even-handed. And you got to ask yourself, as a candidate, or not a candidate, but as an individual, who could do that, are there other opportunities where you could be effective without all the headache and heartburn that comes along with being a party chair? So, there's various nonprofits and other political organizations that I'm working with, that I'm finding opportunity with. So I'm doing that. I'm helping out some of the more liberty-minded legislators get their sea legs, so that they can be effective as well. I'm looking at opportunities outside of Colorado to see how I can be effective on some other front line as well. I'm not necessarily leaving Colorado. I'm not saying that, but I'm looking for other opportunities to utilize my time, talent, and experience for the benefit of the cause as well. So there's a lot that I'm looking at right now. And I certainly don't rule out the possibility of running for public office again in 2024. I mean, anything's on the table. I still don't care for Doug Lamborn. I think he is worthy of a primary challenge because of how ineffective he's become and how he's just grafted himself into the swamp for the past going on 17 years now. But again, that's a big commitment, and I don't rule it out, but I'm certainly not giving a yes or a no on that yet. So I don't know, to answer your question. What I do know, though, is I'm gonna help out in the movement in some meaningful way, because for me it's about the cause, right? I'm not doing this to make friends. I'm not doing this to get some sort of award down the road where someone says, "Oh, you're the statesman of the year," right? No, I care about babies not getting killed in the womb. I care about someone not taking my guns. I care about my kids not being indoctrinated with silly CRT woke agenda education items. That's what I care about, and I care about your family not having to go through that too, because ultimately, all of this will make us less free. And if we look at human history, when governments take more and more power and more freedom, people die. And I don't want that for my neighbors, and I don't want that for my children or their children. And that's what I'm going to be about. And if people think I'm a little rough around the edges, or if they think I'm not nice enough, well, damn right. If you're trying to take my freedoms, if you're trying to take my money, if you're trying to take my neighbors' freedoms and their money, if you're trying to harm my children, yeah, I'm not going to be nice about it. So yeah, I'll be involved.
Wonderful. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Very good to hear that you're going to continue to stay in the fight. Definitely appreciate your boldness and your spine, having the kind of fortitude to stand up and speak your mind and know that it's not necessarily going to win you some friends, but you're going to be right and you're going to speak the truth and stand up for what you believe in. So I really appreciate all the work you've done in Colorado over the years, and let me know, keep me up to date about what your next plans are, and I hope to talk to you again sometime soon.
You bet. Thanks again, Brandon. Anytime.
Awesome, Dave. Well, appreciate your time and talk to you sometime